Hello once again to, I was going to say GGR, to the Trek Way with Gray and I. Thank you. We've been doing a lot of Gray's Green Room at Mr. Gray here, so I get a little bit confused sometimes. Thanks for coming along, Gray. Guess what, Gray?
Sure.
It's special time.
Yay,
What do you
special,
prefer?
special. We
Do you
love
prefer
special.
specials or reviews, or are you not going to comment?
I like everything.
Oh, man.
As long as we're talking Trek, I'm good.
That's a good answer. I was going to say you're one of those annoying people that just likes everything and never has an opinion, but no, he does. He does.
I have plenty of opinions.
we know. Special in Star Trek. Right, Gray, do you want to tell the people today what special we're doing and kind of how we're going to structure it?
So today we're going to talk about our favorite Star Trek series, meaning on television. But I do want to and I think Trev would agree with me. I do want to say one thing before we start, so everybody's clear.
It's our opinion only.
It's our opinion only, number one. Number two, just because we might rate a certain series lower than another doesn't necessarily mean that we think it's a bad series. It's not a bad. If we'll say if it's bad, put it that way. It's just that we prefer X over X, and it doesn't mean that if one's in a 5 position that it's terrible.
Yeah.
It just means that there's others that we prefer. That's all. So we didn't want to make it sound like, oh my God, they rated that one number 5. They must hate it.
I'm tuning out. I'm not watching anymore.
That's right. So just trying to make sure, because I know all of us Trek fans get very picky about these things. So just want to say, okay, so now I'm done with the disclaimer.
We do. Well, that's a good disclaimer. It's important to say that it is our opinion and our opinion only. A lot of Trekkies will share the same opinion. And by means, at the end of this, put comments below. What's your top 5? From worst to best. And that's what we're going to do. We're actually going to start from the worst and work our way down, top 5. There's more than 5.
We want to be careful when we say worst.
Well, yeah, we're going to get to that in a second. Yeah,
least preferable.
Caveat, yeah, because we do have a worst, which we'll get to. And I'm going to let Gray kick this off with the one-off special. It's a special, the Trekway Award to the worst Star Trek series of all time, and why. Tell them, Gray, what is it? And we both share this, by the way.
Okay, the worst Star Trek series ever done since the beginning of time.
And in the future.
In the future. Is Star Trek Picard, hands down, period, no arguments. And I think, generally speaking, not everybody, but generally speaking, a massive amount of Trek fans all tend to agree. Season 1 was not that great. It was okay, even I'm being kind. And we were kind of hoping that was like, all right, there's some stuff that happened, but, maybe it'll get better. Of course, the worst thing of all in the first season is they turned Picard into a robot, but I still can't get over that one. I just don't care. It just doesn't make sense. So that was the worst they could ever did, and they knew it was the worst. And if they could roll it back, they would. But they can't. They already did it. They already made it canon. Then just when you thought that was the worst, Star Trek Picard season 2 comes out, and woo, right down the toilet. I mean, that whole season was so bad. It was smelling from here to high heaven. I mean, if you had to pick 2 good episodes out of the lot, it would be the first and the last. And that's it, boys and girls. The rest of it was so badly written, so badly acted, so bad. As in just bad.
Some bad and good moments from you, Gray, when it comes to that series. I know it'd be more difficult to find out the positive stuff, so why don't you start in the negative and end in any positives in Picard for you?
The positives in Picard?
You got to find something, man.
The only positive at all in the first 2 seasons were Riker and Deanna Troi coming back. There were some nice scenes of their reunion that was really great. There were some nice scenes where Riker came riding the White Horse at the end with a bunch of
and the Control C and the Control V on the keyboard for the starships.
Well, yeah, the scene could have been done better and has been done better by fans. But the whole point of that was good. So that was probably those 2 scenes were probably the best.
Where can people find, sorry to interrupt you, Gray, where can people find the better version of that Picard battle scene? You know.
Yeah, we'll have to, I believe it's Neon Light and
Neon Visual. Neon Visuals again.
Yeah, we'll put it in the description again, but if you just watch what he did and pretend that was what the scene should have been like at the end of season 1,
10 times better.
This work he does is like so fabulous. That guy, it's unbelievable. And it just gets me nuts because when you see somebody like that who's very talented using programs that could be bought by anybody, really, um, and he turns out stuff better than their resources, which are vastly superior than his, and yet they can't put out something, or they get lazy. One of the two.
It
Um,
happens. But
yep.
what about the worst thing or worst one or two things from Picard? I know you've got so many choices to make, man. It's
I can't.
difficult there.
Seriously, there's so much bad in it. I can't even do it. But probably the absolute worst is what I just mentioned, where they turned him into a robot at the end of season 1. I
Yeah,
don't know what was in their heads doing that. I have no idea who thought up this lame brain idea, but you essentially have to suspend the fact that he's not the same Picard, that he's just an android now, because if you don't, it is so difficult to even bother watching the series, and it'll be difficult to even watch the 3rd season coming up if you try to keep that in mind. So I just pretend that it's never happened. They didn't do it because it was just one of the dopiest things I've ever seen in my life that they could have done. Just
yeah.
awful.
Okay, okay.
Many, many awful things in
Yeah,
the 2 years, but that was the worst.
yeah. I have to agree with Gray. Surprised me by putting in a special TTR awards or TTW even award for worst show ever. But just because we only done 5 series, there's more than 5, so we do a special if we have time. Hopefully, we do it for animated section at the end as well. Yes, I agree with Gray. It's also Picard. We are very similar on that. We were singing from the same hymn sheet on that respect. Many crap elements to it. Some of the things I hated the most. Well, the thing I hated number one the most was the android thing, the robot thing that Picard became. That just we got a saying over here, boils my piss. It really does. It really, really. Why do that such iconic character? It really, really does my head in. Gray, he's typing notes as we're going live here. We're doing this live.
All right.
Gray, we're going to talk about every single Star Trek series at this rate.
I know.
In
Well,
fact,
that's the idea,
I think
right?
we have. Yeah, if we've got time, we'll touch on his little comment briefly in a moment. But yeah, there's so many negative things to say. Robot thing number one. For me, the other thing that done my head in was, so the writing was all over the place. I was getting confused, especially in season 2. There is many cringe moments in those 2 seasons.
Yeah.
When you have an actor of the caliber of Patrick Stewart, who, bear in mind, is a very, very good theatre actor, and he comes from there first and foremost. Someone have his gravitas and stature, putting on a crap French accent and making an arse of himself in the second season, I'm just like, or was it the first season? I can't remember. They both blend together because they're both crap. That is cringy, man. Time travel thing's been done to death. There was no need to do what they've done. More season 1 was better than season 2 because I loved the Borg angle. It was just cringy and crappy at moments. If they'd made that a more serious angle, Gray, the Borg angle, and treated the Borg and the Borg cube like a bigger threat than it should, because you looked at that Borg cube and what was going on inside, you went, yeah, I can handle that. It didn't seem like the threat that it used to be from the Borg. Do you know what I mean? And the Borg is, they're my guys. They're number one bad guys of Star Trek, so do not ruin the Borg.
We can go into that probably on another special, but the Borg have been sanitized for some amount of years.
Diluted, man, massively.
To be honest, it shouldn't have been that way. But that's another story.
Aye, well, we'll maybe touch on bad guys in a future series.
Mhm.
You know, bad guys, individuals, species, and maybe we'll do a special individual on just the Borg because they're my favourite bad guys. Spoiler, I think they're brilliant when done well. But yeah, so they were the bad things about Picard. The best thing about Star Trek Picard is in the future. It's called season 3. People, that's the best thing about Picard.
We hope. We hope.
Oh, come on, man. It can't be any worse than the first 2 seasons. And to be fair, no, it can't. Nah, Terry Metalis is our guy that's looking after it. He's a proper Trekkie like you and I, Gray.
No, I'm not doubting that. But what I'm saying is when you're talking about the possibility that it could be crap, yes, it could be crap. And here's the problem.
No,
No,
crap
here's
air,
when I
crap
say it.
air. I'm saying, man, crap air, not crap.
Well, they would have to go a long way to beat season 2 because that was really bad.
You go out your
that
way.
much, right? So that much I'll understand. I get it. But at the same time, the thing that I mentioned, I think this to you off air maybe, but they bringing back just about the entire cast of Next Generation means now the pressure is really on. If you thought the pressure was a lot before, it's 10 times greater. So now if they mess up in the writing with the original cast, it's going to be bad, buddy. It's going to be real bad because everybody will be jumping all over them going like, how could you XXXX?
And that's why Termitalis won't do that, because he is a TNG guy mainly. That's what he grew up with. He loves it, like passionately loves it, and he's a good writer from other programs that he's done. So and producer, so he knows what he's doing. So I've got faith. And we could talk about the future of that as well, and another special where it goes after Picard season 3, because we've heard rumours that there could be a season 4. I hope not. If they branch it in different directions, I'm happy with that. But yeah, Gray, I've done a little bit of jiggery pokery with it. I'll put honourable mentions after there. I'm just thinking about time because we've got to keep it in an hour and a half. But yeah,
since you kind of brought it up, I don't know if there's going to be a season 4 of Picard, but to be honest, I would rather not see a season 4. I would rather see one-offs. So in other words, if they were going to bring back the Next Generation cast or some of it or all of it.
Oh, they were talking about movies.
Well, okay, but then either way, if they bring back a movie and they can pull it off, that'd be fine. Or bring out a 3-episode mini season. That's all. So you bring out 3 shows and you just make it really good and bring the cast in, and it's done. And then you do another one-off maybe.
They did mention that they possibly could do with Picard. They could do some kind of special movie thing afterwards, or smaller movies with the TNG crew, but not connected to Picard's storyline. So it's an option. I'd like to see what they'll do, because they've got a big sandbox to play in. And then basically Termitalis is basically heavily hinting. He said it. I've actually heard him in a Comic-Con type event where he's saying in the future, at the end of season 3, it's handing the baton over to the next crew. And we might see something with that. So, I mean, Gray and I want a show with the Enterprise F. I don't think we'll get it, but we can dream, you know.
If there's supposedly, they keep saying this handing the baton garbage. If they're going to do that, then it would be interesting to see what and I'm only throwing this name out for the hell of it, the next generation would be.
It'll be, what would it be? What would it called? The Next Generation?
Star Trek, the Star Trek, the third generation.
No, it'd be the Future Generation, TFG.
Okay, I'll go along with that for now.
But anyway, yeah. So we'll just want to touch on that really briefly. So we're going into our top 5 here, from worst down, and it's similar to our special we done on Starships a while ago. Save the best to last, and Gray and I actually match up in a few places here. Surprise, surprise, or not? I'm not really surprised. I'll kick off.
Okay, but I do want to preface, because we keep falling into the rut saying worst. It's not worst.
It's least favourable.
It's least favourable, correct?
Least favourable. Yes, you're right. Yeah, no, that's a good point, because none of these in the top 5 are bad shows, and I'll preface that, and I'll put a little bit of defence for my choice here of why I put the original series, right? Now, briefly, for and against, I didn't grow up with it. Not that that's a reason on its own.
That's a decent reason.
Yeah, until the remastered version came out, I couldn't watch that. I struggled with the bad Enterprise graphics and a guy that was been drinking the night before as a puppeteer going like this. And I don't slag them for it. It's the tools they had at their disposal at the time. That's absolutely fine. Doesn't mean I like it just because of these limitations. So one thing I will say about it, though, is I've probably watched a good few episodes over the years, to be fair. Maybe not every single episode, but it's been over the course of my whole Trek career, and I won't remember all of them. I'll remember some of them. And that's why Gray's given me some suggestions of the top episodes of each season to watch. And that'll be a way to discuss.
And you have the remastered versions.
Yeah, the better one as well. So it makes it a lot more enjoyable, because going on to the favourable thing for all the plus points, It does have fantastic writing. It has, if I could rate a series on the quality of actual Trekness and writing, it would be towards the top, if not at the top. So that's a good compliment I'm giving it here. So this is not a negative here, really. I do like some of the rawness of the original series as well, where some things are not applicable then as they are in future Trek as well.
Yeah. There's a few episodes that are definitely dated. There's no doubt.
Oh yeah.
Not many, but there are a few.
It's not a big issue. So that's my that's my least favourable show of all of them. But I still have a lot of time for it, and it's not on this list. But if you had to put a knife, and it's more knives than guns here, I guess, in the UK, Gray. If you had to put a gun at my head, I would have to say the original movies with the TOS are actually better than the TNG movies, despite me being more used to them. So there you go. I can't give a bigger compliment than that. The series is nowhere near as good as the movies, but the movies came later. They had a bigger budget. They had more experience. They were going to be better. Sure. So yeah, that is my least favourable of the lot. Gray's least favourable blows my mind that it's this low down because it was so good. I have a
reason, though.
Go, Gray. What's your least favourable of the 5?
Okay. Remember, I'm saying least favorable. I'm not saying bad because I like it a lot. And so, but it may sound controversial, but there's a reason. I rate Strange New Worlds as in the number 5 position as the least favorable. Now, do I like the series? I like the series immensely. But the reason I'm doing that is because it has not got a track record yet. There's only been one season and one season only. And for that matter, it's only been 12 episodes or whatever it is. That's not enough for me to sit there and vote on an entire series. Every other series that we're rating right here, we're putting into our little top 5. Every one of them has had, several seasons, at least 5, 6, 7 years. And that is a great, huge body of work to judge a series by. You can't really judge a Strange New Worlds because it just plain hasn't been out there long enough. Now, I'm not expecting the series to tank all of a sudden, but let's just say for argument's sake.
It's a bit harsh though, isn't it? I mean, it's only on one season. It's not its fault.
Right. I agree, but that's the whole point.
You can only go on what you've seen.
Right. And what I've seen is extremely good, very promising, and I'm expecting that I'll be changing my opinion on this once we get a little under their belt, so to speak. So that's the only reason why I placed it there, is just because it just doesn't have a big enough body at work. Hard to rate something when you're just going 12 episodes versus, God, I mean, hundreds of episodes of other series that have had a chance and been on the air a lot longer. So that's why I did that.
Okay. It's a very solid reason, and we'll keep emphasizing. We'll have emphasized. We'll keep emphasizing that it's at least favourable. As Gray's had to correct me, because that's true. Not one of these top 5 or bottom 5 are bad shows, in my opinion, or Gray's opinion. Okay, we probably will have time to get through everything, but number 4 on the list for me is Strange New Worlds.
How could you do that? No, I'm kidding.
Similar reasons to Gray, but it's kind of like the fact that, of course, it's kind of like, for obvious reasons, TOS.
Well, it is.
Yeah. It's TOS.
Pre-TOS.
Pre-TOS, yeah. But this is my point that I made before. If TOS had been made now, it'd probably be very similar to Strange New Worlds.
Yeah.
Probably. Maybe the writing a little bit different. Writing's evolved, but it would be very similar, I think, Ray.
Not real. I think the reason why Strange New Worlds appeals across the board to even critics who are not really fond of, and regular people alike, is the fact that, yes, the reason they even did a show like that is because, they finally listened to the fans after 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, that's true.
Number two, the whole show is patterned off of what they did in TOS. There's no way you can deny any of that.
No,
it's this. The writing is just is solid. The acting is solid. The repartee between the ensemble, everybody that was picked for actors, everything up top to bottom is almost a carbon copy of what they did in TOS, with the exception of it being today.
Yeah,
and
true.
It proves it. And look how good it is. I mean, look how much everybody loves it. I mean,
It's
that's.
it's the way it should have been. But
Yeah.
again, TOS
Yeah.
only had certain tools to play with, so I'm never going to down it for that one. Strange New Worlds for me is it's very hard for me to find negatives in it. Really, really, I'm struggling so bad to find negatives in it.
I mean,
I can't find
I
any.
think
None. Generally
there
none.
isn't. The
Not
only
yet.
negative would go back to what I said before. It's only been one season,
That
so
isn't
we
a
need to see
negative.
more.
That's like a
Well,
force
yeah,
of
no,
nature.
no, no.
It's
Yeah, yeah.
just it is what it is. I mean, it might be a negative later on, where we go, God, there's been too many episodes, or there's been too little, and please stop now, or
Yeah.
please carry on. But I don't like these shorter episodes these days anyway. I mean, shorter season lengths anyway. And we've discussed this in the past, but at least we're getting really good writing with this. So many positives to it. Many positives to this show.
Yep.
Let's say 2S the way it should have been. We get to see a lot more of Pike, who people that watch the show know the story of why Pike's there and why Kirk's there, and it conveniently folds into a nice story for for Strange New Worlds, because they had about, what was it, 6, 7, 8 odd years of the Pike era to cover, so they could go a full run if they wanted to and explore this character and the crew fully.
I mean, I don't know if they're actually going to do it, but technically in the canon, Pike was captain of the Enterprise for 11 years.
Was it that long?
Yeah, he went on 2 5-year missions plus some.
They won't,
So,
man. They won't go that far.
So I don't know if they're going to do 11 seasons of Strange New Worlds.
Seven max. We just think of Discovery. It's going into its 5th season, so if it might get 7, but I doubt it'll get more. You know, you don't want to get fatigued.
No, I think what I hope is that if they can do top quality 5 seasons of top quality stuff, I think that's fine. No problem. You got to do at least 3 seasons of top quality stuff, and I'd rather see like 5. Once 5 is done and it's top notch stuff, fine. Then just do one-offs or move on to the next whatever.
I wish the Picard had listened to you, mate. They missed out the top quality part when they were doing 3 seasons.
Well, the other thing that's bad about Picard too, just to backtrack a little bit, is that when you took a look at the character of Picard in The Next Generation, we'll get onto that in a second. They took the character, the strong, domineering, intelligent person, doesn't put up with stuff, he knows what he's doing, very sure of himself, confident. And when they got to Star Trek Picard series, they turned the guy into an old doddering man who takes crap from everybody. Where did this come from?
There was a long time in story in the Star Trek universe that he's not been on screen for, mate, so he has aged quite a bit since then.
Right.
To be fair.
But they could have wrote it better. I mean, I don't accept the fact that just because you're an aging actor that you necessarily may be bad. And I'll give you for instance, we talked on GGR a little bit about Harrison Ford. Now, Harrison Ford is in his early 80s, right? So for Harrison Ford to come back and play Han Solo, or to come back and play, you're right, or to come back and play any other characters, they're talking about him coming back to the Air Force One. I mean, I'm sorry, he's too old for the part. It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
But if he's put into a part that's written for his age range, he's great. And I'll give you one quick example. I won't belabor it too long.
Hopefully
There's a series on Paramount Plus called 1923, and the whole thing surrounds.
Crap.
No, it's great. I was wanting to watch it, but he plays the perfect role because he's the patriarch of the family. He's supposed to be old, and he's good, and so for that type of a role, he's good at it.
Okay.
But Stewart just seems like he's like, let's just throw the old guy in there and make him do a bunch of stuff that he's not really capable.
Well, whose fault is that? That's the director's fault and the writer's fault. It's not his fault.
Yeah.
Well,
if you've read some of the articles that have come out since season 1 and season 2, he has a lot of input on. Yeah. It was originally said.
Well, maybe he shouldn't have had input then. He doesn't know what he's doing.
Correct.
He's not a writer.
Because he said that when they first tapped him to come back for Picard, he said, "I don't want to do what I did before," and he didn't want any of the original series in the from TNG to be in at all.
Yeah, no,
none. And then he finally had to relent a little bit, and they let Riker in, and they let Data in a little bit and stuff. But he didn't want that. And look what's happened between all that.
They've all came back because Terry's come in and went, "Shut up, Patrick. I'm in charge now." No, let's move on from. Please, let's move on from that because it's going to just ruin my image of Jean-Luc Picard and Patrick Stewart. Realize, right? So you know why I like Strange New Worlds? There's no reason to dislike it at all. Gray's fourth least favourable show absolutely appalls and disgusts me. I'm going to actually cut him. I'm going to cut a section out of the pod, so you'll never know what it is. Go, Gray.
My least preferable, not worse. Not that I don't like it, but my least favorable is Voyager in the fourth edition.
Sorry, carry on.
And here's my reason behind it, because I don't want to get too, because we're going to cover the other shows. So the other three shows that we have picked, to me, as I watched Star Trek through its years of progression, or whatever you want to call it, Voyager I really like, but the problem with Voyager was the beginning of
the problem.
I'm not gonna say the beginning of the end, but the beginning of the writing getting suspect. So there are some really good episodes in Voyager. I mean, really top-notch writing, just like the prior series that came before it. No problem. Then there's some shows, and there's more than one of them that are just kind of like, And then there's a couple there's some that are really bad as well. And
like every season.
It's just, so the very consistency. In other words, I'm used to like a level of consistency up here that we were getting.
Oh, mate, you're catastrophic. You're in deep space. Your expectations.
Well,
all
I'm saying is TOS, TNG, Deep Space Nine were all up here for the most part. And then when Voyager came around, I took a little notch below. And then when Enterprise came out, I went just like that. With the exception of maybe the fourth season, it just went down the tubes really fast. And so then the rest is history, as we know. But regardless of that fact, do I love, let's say, 2/3 of Voyager? If I had to like try to put a number on it or something, I would say yeah. So based on that 2/3, it's a very strong series, and I like it a lot. In fact, I really enjoy the fact that they kind of brought back Voyager when they did Star Trek Prodigy, which Trevor and I loved, because it was just trying to get that homage thing going.
Kind of Voyager, isn't it? It's kind of Voyager sequel.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Kind of unofficial.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
And now going into the next season, it's way Voyager like, especially
Voyager A.
Voyager A. Yeah. So that's all exciting stuff. And on top of that, we also got a little taste of Deep Space Nine today, as in Lower Decks. So it comes around, goes around, kind of thing.
Okay.
But anyway, that's my
what some positives on Voyager for you, mate? You gave me negatives.
Stuff. I mean, I thought generally speaking, the ensemble was fantastic. I mean, the cool thing was having a female captain, which hadn't happened before.
Yeah.
And it happened in a time period where, unfortunately, some female actors out there weren't put in proper lead positions of either TV shows or movies.
They're put in stereotypical
roles. It was getting there.
Yeah.
Right. It was getting there, but nobody made that bold move. And especially on Star Trek, it had always been like, captain's got to be a male. Captain's got to be a male. It's always like that.
And Janeway had bigger balls than a lot of other fellow male counterparts out there.
And I think it was ingenious that they got Kate Mulgrew to play the part, because she really did play a female captain part.
Who was the French actress before her that was going to be in? I've forgotten her name. It's at the tip of my tongue. I'm glad they never went with her, because in that pilot, she was crap. There was just no rapport with her and the crew.
Yeah, I think sometimes things happen for a reason. In this particular case, it did. So I think I think Captain Janeway is I hate to use the word stereotypical, but the model, I guess, is a better name for the female officer in Star Trek.
Yes.
Every female officer should look to her as the pattern, so to speak.
Female balls.
They do.
Yeah.
Right, because you see it even in Strange New Worlds, where the number one is female. Which, by the way, if y'all aren't, I'm older than everybody out there, but when the Cage first came out before TOS, who was number one? It was a female. So there could have been a female in a position, or there was briefly way back in the '60s, but the network
they didn't allow her. He was going to make her that high level, but Roddenberry was kind of countered at that point. So
yeah, he couldn't get that one through over their heads, and they just said no, we can't do this, we can't do. And so he decided, all right, well, I'm going to use the Vulcan as the number one. And they started fighting him on that too. But then he said he got away with it because Roddenberry said, hey, it's an alien. I mean, we're not talking about anybody on Earth. They go, oh, that's right. Okay, that's okay then.
There you go.
So he's actually able to get around the suits quite often in the original series. So anyway,
good.
So that's that.
Did you have a
story.
favourite episode or character or season in Voyager?
I mean, my favorite character is always going to be Janeway. There's no doubt.
Same.
She was obviously the strongest. Probably my second favorite would be 7 and 9.
Why'd that be great? Would there be two favourites there for you?
It's not because of the sex appeal, which was interesting. I mean, don't get me wrong. She's a beautiful woman, but that wasn't really the only reason.
I don't even like blondes.
She really had that part down, though. She really, I mean, that was not an easy part.
Great. She can assimilate me any day, pal. More than once, not a problem. Resistance is futile. And I agree.
And look, that the fans really did enjoy that character. And
OnlyFans, what?
And she popped OnlyFans, and she popped up in Picard. She popped up in Picard, so obviously people really like her. She wouldn't be coming back.
And she's going to be the number one of the Titan A behind the captain. We don't know who the captain is. She better not be captain by the end of it. It's too quick for her. I think because of her unique position, she gets a field promotion to whatever temporary captain at the time, and then she gets a full rank of commander or number one. That's okay because it's hard, but do not make her captain yet.
You know, it'd be really cool. I don't know if they're going to do it, but what might be kind of neat or a little different would be that the captain of the Titan A turns out also to be a female, a la Janeway.
Oh, two women in charge, mate. That's going to be a moody bridge. That is going to be a really moody bridge.
now. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
As far as other characters, like Chakotay, I know was the number one, or her number one.
He was a good number one, but he wasn't a big Trekkie. He came into that going, it's a payday. I'm not really interested in Trek, and that's maybe a good thing.
We'll probably do another special on this, but as
first officers,
yeah, I think he was
okay.
Weak.
No, he was okay. For me, he was okay. He wasn't amazing. He wasn't the worst. He was very comfortable and solid, but he wasn't excelling.
But he should have been much more. My third favorite character probably would have been the Doctor.
Oh, Bob Picardo. I love Bob Picardo. Right. I agree with Gray.
Three would probably my favorite.
The exact same three order. Yeah, I agree. Anyway, right. Okay, so disgusted it's 4, but I'll let you off, Greg, because it's least favourable. Right, okay. Curveball for third. Grey, I selected the same thing, and we'll give our reasons as to why. DS9 for both. DS9 for me, a few years ago, would have been in 4th or 5th instead of 3rd. But as I've got older, I've matured my Trek palette. I have watched more DS9. I've seen the DS9 episode in Lower Decks. Loved that. I've just enjoyed it more. What I didn't like about it at the very start was, and I haven't seen Babylon 5 for a comparison here, people, right? So Gray has. He's one of his top shows. My
second favorite sci-fi series of all time.
Yeah, and one of these days I will get into it. For me, Star Trek has got to be on a starship. And let me explain briefly why. I get this context that we're trying to go with, and this is the reason why I hope they never do Starfleet Academy, because that will potentially. For me, it's got to be on a ship. Space Station was the whole social thing. It was the whole... There wasn't as much storytelling potential, right? Which I think DS9 debunked at quite a bit, actually. It managed to do pretty well. There's a lot going on in this station. There's a lot of shops and stalls and stuff. Quark's Bar, everything. But the problem is they were really grounded, so they would take their shuttlecraft, or runabouts as they're called, like a poor man's starship, and take that to nearby planets and whatnot. But it was limited. I've just spat on the monitor. Nice. It was very limited. And then for me, its best seasons were actually the Dominion War. What were they on? Not the whole time, but a decent chunk. A starship. And my favourite starship, the Define. And it just opened it up massively. You could have some of it on the space station, some of it anywhere you wanted in the quad or quadrants, because there was a wormhole nearby. and it just opened up massively. And I'm about, yes, great, and listeners and viewers, I'm all about the story first and foremost, but do you know what's a close second, Gray? As Janeway done in Prodigy when she was hijacked, the pew pew, right? And for me, that is brilliant. And the Defiant, when it gets ripping with either Dax, Sisko, or Worf in charge of it, they're all excellent commanders of that ship, was just brilliant. I found it a little bit too convenient, although I know why they done it, that they brought the space station up beside the Bajoran wormhole. That first episode blew my mind because they're moving. Chief Miles O'Brien, I don't know if he's a chief at this stage, moves the space station right beside it, and it's not supposed to be moved like that. And the way they work it out with the shield's been strengthened, and she can't take it anymore, Captain, and pushing it with thrusters was brilliant. And then it got a bit too much like a soap opera in space, with the space station, and you hear the gossip and down at Quark's bar, and but I've loved it ever since. It's got a lot better. It's higher in my rankings now. There has been some phenomenal performances and characters on that show for me. There isn't many negatives apart from the early seasons where it's a bit. I guess Gray, Avery Brooks without a beard should be banned, just like Jonathan Frakes. Jonathan Frakes without a beard should be banned. It's not right. Put the beard on. You look manual. You look tough. I'd love to see more of Avery Brooks, but I think he was a couple of dilithium crystals short of a warp core near the end, especially in recent times with Shatner's documentary, Captain's documentary. I think he's lost the love of acting in general. I think he's not into it as much. I think he is, and I'm not slagging him for this one. You know, some people, the marbles go a little bit. When you remember that, the Captain's thing, Gray, and Shatner's talking to him, and everything was a metaphor to him. He was on his piano and he's talking about, blah, 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 and the answer is, and he would hit some keys, and Shatner's going, okay, moving on to the next Captain. But he'll never come back. It's a shame because, do you know, he used to be a higher captain for me than I put him down in a recent list. I think he was my third favourite captain. I think the guy is, in terms of kick-ass, he's just as good as Shatner, if not better for me. And the kick-ass aspect, Shatner was more balanced for me. But brilliant show. Gray, do you want to tell the people some reasons why you love it, things you don't like about it, favourite seasons, characters, whatnot? Who's my favourite character, actually? Avery Brooks, hands down.
I would say ditto next. No, only kidding.
Avery Brooks and probably Garrick and Quark. Three top characters.
It's really hard. I mean, to go back on the series as a whole,
keep talking.
Just about everything that you said, I pretty much agree with. As far as what I thought about the series as a whole, it did struggle a little its first season or two, or maybe three. I think trying to find its ground, I guess, or where it was going. So I wouldn't say the episodes were all weak, but they could have been better. But man, once Worf joined, which is a big reason why the show also did better, is they took a TNG character, who we thought was done after Next Generation was winding up, and he ends up going over there. Plus, we forget too that Colm Meaney, who played,
but he was a small part on TNG. I think that was a bit of a difference, wasn't it?
No, I agree, but still, it was a TNG cast member again.
And then what was the first episode? Who was in the first episode and what ship that was notable?
Well, Picard was in the first episode.
And Enterprise D.
And the Enterprise D, because it was the tossing.
And the beef between the two captains, or not a commander at the time, was brilliant.
Yeah, they're not real fond of each other, and Sisko only remembers the Wolf 359 and various other things that when Picard was a Borg, and that all created an interesting tension, which was really cool. But anyway, when Michael Dorn came over as Worf, I think all the writing started to come up a notch, and they started really getting involved and trying to figure out, like, how can we do some things on this show that are different? Because again, generally speaking, it's not spaceship bound; it's station bound. But they left the station quite a bit, in the runabouts, and had a lot of really good adventures. I especially enjoyed the whole thing with Cardassian and Bajoran, because that was the whole thing where the Bajorans were the ones that were
was that in that really hot planet, and they were in caves and stuff, and they had to make an alliance at the end between them. It's cat and mouse. That was brilliant, Gray.
Right, and the tension between the races, especially when it's kind of flipped around and Bajorans were in a better position, it really made a lot of really good and interesting tension all the way through the series. And so Kira Nerys was always, arguing against back and forth with the Cardassians, and the Cardassians made a bunch of interesting characters that the show had on as well. So it really I liked it because it offered something that was different, and the writing especially after the second or third season, really went up a notch. When they decided that they wanted to get the Dominion War started, I thought that was brilliant because that was something that we really had never been
The first proper war,
done,
full
more or
scale.
less.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And how would you handle this? And that took a while. Odo being the changeling, we end up finding out that his changeling race is the one that was responsible for the the Dominion War. That
Spoilers.
was a that was a big old, oh please, spoilers after
I
all these years.
know. I'm taking a piss.
So that was something that was quite, like what,
Yeah.
and all the tension that brought. So there was a lot of brilliant, brilliant episodes in that whole series, and everything that you pretty much wanted to see, you saw. And I also nod my hat to for this one and only time to Lower Decks when they went back to revisit Deep Space Nine after all these years, and they brought back a couple of the actors to do the voices of the characters,
That
and
was so
that
good.
was such a good episode because it
What was the
wasn't
funnest part of that, Gray?
well,
That the Lord X
the
part.
best part for me was that it wasn't treated, it wasn't treated as a comedy cartoon episode as much as the rest of the season was. This was more treating it more as a DS9 kind of thing. It was more strong in the DS9 area than it was in the Lower Decks area.
Yeah.
And that whole thing was perfect because and the characters or the voice actors that took Quark and Kira Nerys, Nana Visitor and Armin Shimmerman, right? They
Nah.
like they Nana, sorry. They never It's like they never ever left their characters. They fell right back into it so well. I thought I was watching a brand new episode or a movie
I
of
hope they got to
DS9.
voice act against one another, mate, and they weren't
Oh
separate
yeah,
booths because
I'm
that
sure
adds
they
to the
did.
chemistry. Yeah.
I'm sure they did. So that was just like great. So that series really holds up well. And now especially when we're talking about, at least in my mind, my top 3 are so close to each other because they're so
Yes.
good, and they're so good in many areas
It was hard to
that
separate them.
none of them right, there's none of them are their negatives are different negatives, but they all represent the strength of the show, which definitely was the writing, number 1, and then, of course, the actors, who portrayed, number 2.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Deep Space Nine has so much going for it, and I think people that look back now are going like, "Oh, this is a series without a ship necessarily always running around. This is
Yeah.
different, and
Yeah.
a whole war, this is different."
For me,
And
my second and third choices are actually they'd be exactly the same level if I was allowed to do it like that, but it makes no sense in any
mhm,
kind of scale, Gray, so I had to separate them. My top is
right.
my top, definitely, but one thing I was saying to you just briefly before, Gray, was
Mhm,
the remind people that are watching this has probably seen this episode, but if you have not, please make sure you watch the DS9 episode on Lord Decks. I can't remember what episode it was, but it's easy enough to find out. It starts with them going to DS9 pretty much, and the DS9 music comes on, and then the commander tells them literally to go around the pylons, and it goes da 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 da
and
da
the
da,
whole music,
and
yeah.
then they kind of do a loop the pylons, and then they're saying, right, what should we do now? Oh, I don't know. Just go around the pylons again, and
Just do it
look
again.
at them, and and the music comes on again. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
They've gone around 2-3 times. Like 2 hours later.
But I think that was so cool about that scene before it got to the funny part is when they arrived and they popped on DS9 on the view screen. Immediately, I was transported back to DS9 days when I first watched it.
Yeah,
Immediately, there's the
yeah.
station. There comes the
The
music,
wormhole.
and I'm just going, and the wormhole and everything. And I was just like, yeah. And I was just like, wow. And that was
That
the
was it.
closest thing to me of having a brand new Deep Space Nine episode, like the Lost episode or something
Yeah, and it was the
that you
original
never saw.
music. And Gray and I
Yep.
have got a problem with the music being half-arsed. Like, they're taking nods and hints from Voyager. They do it with Voyager a lot, and they don't put the full... Please put the
Yep.
full Voyager music in one time in the new seasons of Prodigy. Please. Just once.
If they when they reveal Voyager A in Prodigy season 2, and if they don't play the Voyager music complete,
Mm.
or at least the real thing, I'm gonna be pissed. But we'll
Ah.
see. We'll see
We
what
will see.
happens.
We will see. Yeah. DS9 is fantastic. Don't get me wrong. They did take a while to find their feet, and it started getting a lot better. When did the fight come on? And was that season 4 or 5? Can never remember which. That's when it started getting better. You had everything to play with in the toy box.
Sure.
But yeah, so great choice for third place, I think, for both. Like I say, it's very hard to choose the top 3. It really is. Spoiler alert as well. Our second favourite show, Gray and I both selected the same thing. And it's just because they're so close. They're the same kind of era, the same quality of writing, that kind of stuff. In fact, you would find a lot of writers and actors and recurring actors were going between the shows and then Voyager as well. Our second favourite show is The Next Generation. Oh, wow. Right. Yep. So, what year did TNG start again, roughly, Gray? Late 80s?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I was born in 83, so I didn't properly grow up with it. I mean, when it started, I was young. And when it ended, I was that bit older. So, if I would have been a full-blown, full-fat teenager when it started, I would have appreciated it more and absorbed it more. So I was only kind of half invested in it, but I still enjoyed it. It was more the movies that intrigued me. That's what first got me into Star Trek, the TNG movies. Some good, some bad. And for me...
One good, one mediocre, and the rest are bad.
Well, it's usually good, bad, good, bad. It's such a weird record with the movies, especially TNG ones. But yeah, so for me... I loved. Let's start with the negatives. The negatives for me, some episodes were a bit. This is the downside of having so many episodes in a Star Trek season, because we're talking about them being too short now, or not the season not been long enough, because the quality is better to compensate, and we don't want to get in that whole debate. But the counter to having 20 plus episodes is. There are filler episodes for sure.
Yeah,
there are
some stinkers here and there.
Yeah, and somewhat, but we've proven that filler episodes don't need to be garbage, but sometimes they are. You can't write great episodes for 20, 25 episodes as possible. Some of them were just, when you're bored sometimes, you don't have anything to do, and you are in a binge mode for watching TV. I used to do this, not so much now. I'll go on and go, right, what TNG episode I fancy watching, what DS9 or Voyager episode I fancy watching, and you'll go for the classics because you know they're good, or you'll go for one that you've forgotten to be reminded. Very rarely will you go for the guff ones because, why would you waste your time? So that's the only negative I can think of that. I loved everything. Oh, yeah, and the male officers wearing skirts in the first season. Roddenberry should have been slapped across the face for that. I'm sorry, mate. He made an arse of that one. They changed that quickly, though. Thank God.
I think TNG suffered from the same thing that
DS9 and
DS9.
Yeah,
sure. It took like 2 years for it to really start to crank up to a.
And
I'll tell you, thank goodness that they didn't abandon it, because in today's world, if it premiered. Those first 2 seasons, it would have been almost like a Picard.
It would have tanked. It would have tanked. Yeah,
people would have went like, I don't know.
Yeah. So.
But they stuck with it. They got through the shaky parts or whatever. Which even the shaky parts, were better than Picard.
There was 2 things for me that only 2 negatives I could think of. Like say 3, I guess. Maybe the some of the episodes were not amazing, but the majority of them were good, or at least very solid 7 out of 10. Also, let's say the male officers with the skirts, and also I touched on this point not long ago. If Riker had a beard from day one, first season would have been brilliant, but he looked like a baby. He was so young and chiseled, and there was no beard, and it wasn't manly. Well, you put a beard on him, you put a beard on Avery Brooks, they look solid. They're a proper captain. They're a man's man. You have a lot more confidence in them. So they're the only negatives I think. The positives are too many to state all, but let's go with the Starship for one. This massive, colossal, almost battleship. It's not really a battleship, but it's so big it may as well be. Many ships come up again. The Duras sisters in Star Trek 7 Generations are like, you kidding me? That's a Galaxy class starship. They were scared shit of this thing, It was an impressive ship. It could hold so many people. It had such a talented crew on board that all complemented each other really, really well. They introduced the Borg for the first time, my favourite bad guy, so thank you so much for that. They didn't do starship separation nowhere near enough. I don't think any ship that can do that done it enough. The Enterprise E could could detach. You never seen it.
Well, the original designs all the way back to TOS was that it could separate. Period.
Yeah.
Always
including including the original Enterprise.
Oh, yeah.
What?
Yep. That was the thing that it could separate and be used as a lifeboat in an emergency.
Okay.
But they never did it. They never did it in TOS for a couple of reasons.
So it's not canon then.
The main reason they didn't do it in TOS is because they couldn't afford it. The effects for that would have shot it right through the roof.
True.
So they just couldn't. They didn't bother.
Did they ever state it though on screen, Gray? Is it canon?
Yeah.
This is not
I
canon.
don't believe so.
Oh, that sucks. I wanted it to be canon. Even just
Well,
say
it is canon because it was in all the writings in the Bible.
Is that canon, mate? It's
Bible.
got to be on screen to be in canon.
No, that's always been considered canon. It's just not.
Okay.
This has never been done much.
I've learned something
then we got
interesting.
then we finally got a little bit of it done in Next Generation in the movie and stuff. I mean, but they didn't really do a lot of that.
No, they made an arse of it.
And to be honest with you, I don't think they ever should have done that. You have plenty of lifeboats you can send out on a ship.
It would have been quicker. It would have been quicker.
Yeah,
way quicker.
And let's face it. Everybody knows that when the saucer separates from the main body, what happens? Both pieces look but ugly.
They are but ugly, and especially the saucer section. Say that 10 times really quickly. The saucer section is slow as because it can be faster than it is. If it's in warp and it separates, it can, with its own momentum, continue in low warp for a while. But it wasn't. It was stone cold still at the time, so no wonder it literally just had impulse drives to try and get it away from the warp core, and it had no chance. So, and then you put Deanna Troi in charge, she crashes the bloody ship, man. So there's many jokes there. But yeah, so I'm sure male officers would have done this too. Not picking on her because she's a woman, but she sucks at steering starships. So they were the negatives, and the pluses I loved about it. It was just so good. Again, you could still see at this stage though, Gray, because CGI was only starting to become of a thing then, and it was still very raw. You could still tell that they were borrowing many of the stages and props and crap backgrounds and scenery from TOS, because some of it you're like,
just a little more polished.
Okay, yeah, a little bit more. Like almost everything we do remastered now, but still you were like, okay. Obviously, CGI gets a lot better on. So yeah, that's the good and bad reasons behind me for TNG. Gray's TNG as well. What's good, what's bad about it, notable characters, episode seasons.
I mean, it's hard for me to go in and start naming episodes, but there's just so many good ones. But for me, the writing again comes to the front. I mean, the writing on the majority of the episodes is just so good. And I think the ensemble of actors that they had were great, with the exception of Wesley Crusher. Other than that, nobody liked Wesley.
I like Wesley.
Why do you think they got rid of Wesley so quickly after a couple seasons?
He was so smart and intelligent, and
now they didn't handle
jealous,
that
Gray.
right at all. And they're putting him on the bridge, and I'm going like, no, I don't think so. Cadet on the bridge, no.
Star Trek prodigy. Excuse me.
I get it, but with the exception of that, Wesley, which they got rid of, is that the original cast was just really well done, and the writing was just so top notch. It was just excellent. And I think they went into that series with a tremendous amount of pressure to be good, because everybody at that point loved TOS. They loved the writing, how strong it was. It was the first, right? The movies were already going, things like that, and they're just like, wow, do we have some shoes to fill here? And that could have very well been tanked right down the.
Great. Do you think that was the reason it was so successful, that the movies came along, TOS movies came along, and if it wasn't for the TOS movies doing well, they may have not very well been a Next Generation?
Oh, I think that's definitely the thing. When they saw the movies doing well, they originally were thinking about, well, should we just spin off something different into Star Trek movies? And then somebody said, no, why don't just go back to TV?
Yeah.
And then we can go back to movies again. Oh, okay. So then they did Next Generation back on television.
Yeah.
So it was just, it just was such a good series from top to bottom, and it had a great ending when they finally ended the season. The two-parter was just. Well, I forgot the name of it now. Gosh.
Yesterday something. No, that's a different Yesterday. Enterprise is different.
But
Yeah.
that's the one season where the ending totally made sense, and it was great because the finale of Deep Space Nine at the very end was not that great. It was very anticlimactic, and that was the
Oh
only thing that
yeah,
kinda pissed me off about Deep Space Nine. Started out good, like how they were gonna end it in the finale, and then it just kinda just fell flat,
it did.
completely flat.
It's sad that.
Whereas the ending of TNG was just was the best of both worlds? Like, I
Oh,
forget.
great.
Anyway,
That's a good point to point out. See the best of both worlds. It's one of, if not the best two-parter, like mini story arc thing I've ever seen in Star Trek to this day. Wow.
I think there was
Incredible.
also a bunch of other episodes. I can't remember the names too. I think wasn't there one Measure of a Man where they had oh god, that movie star at the time. Oh god, there's just so many. I can't do it.
No,
It's
I don't
just too
expect
much.
you to name episodes. Yeah, you can name like story arcs or like favorite preferred
Yeah,
seasons or something like that.
but it was just I can't even name a good favorite season to be honest. I mean, if I had to, I might put season 1 and 2 kind of to the side a little bit because it was kind of getting its thing
And
going.
then the
But at
rest
the
are
same
even. Okay.
right, and then the rest would be all pretty much even and up and down. And for me, it was actually really thrilling because I grew up with TOS, so I thought that was it. TOS in the movies, and that's the end of the era. So when I heard little inklings going on of like, well, we're thinking about coming back to television with Star Trek, I'm like, what? Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
what
this is
was
gonna
it,
be
what was
great.
that like, Gray? What do you mind telling the viewers roughly what age you would have been when it was coming out, or just before it was coming out, and what your expectations or thoughts were? That this thing that I thought would probably die slowly,
Well,
just
when
keep going.
TOS came out, I was 10. When Next Generation came out, you're talking 20 years later, so I was 30.
Ah, perfect age
So
to enjoy
yeah,
it.
so it was just you when TOS finally came back in '79 in the movies and stuff, that was like heaven for me. It was like unbelievable. And then to hear that they might actually come back to TV in some manner, with a new cast was just like, oh wow, this is like more than I can imagine. That would be
Yeah,
just great. I never really thought, to be honest with you, I didn't think it was ever going to go past TNG. I figured after TNG was over, that would be the end of
that's
the
it.
era.
Did you think
Uh,
TNG movies? Did you think that was a possibility?
I thought there could be some movies here and there, sure, but I pretty much figured that was it. They're not gonna push this any further. But then DS9 started, and it started towards the end of TNG, so basically it was kind of a crossover. And then I start going like, wow, it's the third one. Now that's got to be the end of an era, right there. They're gonna do this the three. That's gonna be it. And then all of a sudden Voyager comes around. I'm going like, yay, another one. I was like,
All close
I see
together.
what's and now it's ironic because all these years later we have probably too many going on or
Ah,
whatever.
never
But
such thing as too much Star Trek.
no,
Behave
I
yourself.
no. Well, yeah, it depends. If they're as bad as Picard, I don't want to see them. But
Yeah, that's
other
just
than
the
that,
one. Come on.
but now we're like we're Trek spoiled because now we got so much going on with Trek. It's
Great.
unbelievable.
TNG, I want to know from you, favorite character, like characters, or like if you got a top two or three,
Uh, I
on
probably would go.
anything negative. There must be something negative about TNG.
The only thing on my top characters, and this is really cutting hairs a little bit, maybe, but obviously it would be Picard, Riker, and Data. After
Mm,
that, then it would depend. Probably right after that, it would be Worf, and then it's so hard because the others they're all so good.
yeah,
But if I had
normally.
but if I had to be pinned down, I would say those are my top three, and then it would be Worf, and then it would be Geordi, and whatever.
Okay.
Beverly Crusher was interesting, but it,
Hot back
it was
then.
it was okay. It was okay. I know I
Mm.
met her. I have a picture with her and everything. So
Man, I want more of these interviews, man. I want Deep Space Nine interviews.
um,
I want
I know.
Voyager episodes interviews. Sorry.
Unfortunately, some of the people that I had a chance to interview were ones that were able to be interviewed. The other ones that I did meet and got to talk to for a couple of minutes were not doing interviews at the time for whatever reason. That's up to them. I can't
Uh,
push them to do it. So
uh,
I met Gates McFadden, talked to her a little bit, didn't get the interview.
what one night with Gates?
Uh, I met Kate Mulgrew.
So have I.
Um, yeah, and so that was just it was brief, but it was nice and and stuff. And again, couldn't no interview on that one.
Yeah. Well.
So there was a couple I met that I didn't get an interview. It's just the way it happens. But I was very, very, very fortunate to interview the people I did,
Okay.
which is really great. But,
Any negative? Any negative about TNG? There must be something you were like,
no,
nah, it could have done better, or I wasn't. Not like you disliked or hated. We're doing least favorable, remember? So
right. No, like I said, I would probably put the first 2 seasons if you're.
yeah, that's true.
And I'm loosely saying negative, so because they obviously weren't as good. But again, that would probably be the only negative if you want to call it that, because then it just started really ramping up and doing good. So
yeah.
yeah.
That is a good shout. Great. That is I'll settle on that then. We change a little bit for our top show.
Yep.
And for me, right, I'll go first. It's not the same. My favourite show is Voyager. Right, okay. Negative wise for that, it's hard for me to find negatives for that show, but I want to start with negatives, so I'll finish with the positive. And maybe again, like TNG, there was the odd episode that was about, like Gray mentioned, it's a bit crap. There wasn't many of them for me. Most episodes were a solid 7 out of 10 or higher for me, but you got the odd episode you were just like, yeah, the fillers, I'm not a massive fan of that. This was at the stage where they were using a lot of CGI then. And CGI for special effects was expensive, so they had to cut that down depending on what they were doing. So they're the only negatives I can think of. And I guess I know it's counterintuitive to the nature of the series, but how many times they could have got home quicker if they just pulled their finger out their arses ever so slightly more than they did. Yeah. They could have. And you're like, they could have done this, could have done. Yes, I know it's counterintuitive to the show, but the only negatives I can find, putting it away, I like pretty much everything else about it. For one, the concept fascinated me. Having this ship all by its own on the other side of the galaxy trying to get home. Oh yeah, one small negative thing that's a funny one. The unlimited bloody supply of shuttlecraft and torpedoes, man. Honest to God. If they just had the Prodigy vehicle replicator thing, which was a technology they had then, they just didn't write for it.
We can assume they had.
No, we can't because it's not canon.
Well, first of all, I could get under that one because as long as the crew is capable, and I'm sure they were, of building torpedoes and stuff, they would just have to find the materials.
Yeah, it's the problem, Gray. You have to find the materials. Replicating stuff, it takes energy, but you can't replicate energy. You have to find those raw materials. And yes, it's possible, but you need like refineries and all that shit that you maybe can't do in a starship.
But they're not going to make an episode about that because it'd be boring as hell. So you just got to kind of assume.
I know, but we get technical and nitty gritty. That's the whole point, Gray.
Yeah,
of us, you know. But yeah, I can let it slide. I said, did I not say a little funny negative thing? I'm not picking it up for that one. But yeah, like the positives, the aspect of them being like over there, the technology they picked up on the way that then got incorporated into Starfleet later on. Transwarp didn't come directly from that, but they learned stuff from that. Slipstream did come from that, hands down. Now, the one things that you don't see, and I'm glad you don't see, future Janeway, when she went there, in Endgame, transphasic torpedoes and the shields, you don't see them again after that, and that's maybe a good thing because maybe they can explain this with like timey-wimey stuff, bringing that technology to the future. You have to scrap it to protect the timeline or something. I'm okay with that, but they took advances forward. They were crossing the moral threshold and bending the Prime Directive more than a lot of the other Trek shows done because, we're over here, it's okay. No, Janeway always stuck to her guns. We are Starfleet officers. She managed to get 2 crews to come together, the Maquis crew and the Federation crew. There was beef with that, storylines behind that. It was brilliant. And like I say, Janeway with the female balls, don't mess with her, man. She was hardcore. Some great storylines. And they took my favourite bad guy, the Borg, and they just put it in a present with a bow on the top of it, man. They just perfected it. They had the CGI then. They had more advanced or more experienced stories for Star Trek at this stage.
And they had, didn't they introduce Species 8479?
Yes, someone that can kick their asses. And I loved that. Although it got a bit too comical when they seen them Species 8472 on the Federation what was it? It was an outpost that recreated, so we're getting ready to infiltrate them, and it got a bit too silly sometimes for this one. This is the most powerful species I've ever come across, and Chakotay's going on a date with one of them. Man, I was like, what? So that episode was both great and crap for that reason. But I loved that, like Scorpion parts 1 and 2 when 79 comes on board and Species 8472, and the score and that, the music, da 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 da, and you're just like, wow. The Borg are getting their arses handed to them.
We could do another whole special on the music.
We definitely should, Greg. But the one small negative you could say about the Borg stuff is they've done a bit too much of it. There was something like 20 plus episodes, high 20s.
Well, this is what Borg. I had mentioned before, that or the part that I didn't like about Voyager is that as the seasons went on, the Borg started to get watered down more and more.
Yes.
Till at the end, when it was all over, the Borg was the half of what they used to be.
Well, what happened at the end when they were doing that, Grey, with the Borg? Literally, Starfleet, especially with Future Janeway, were pissing all over the Borg. We were literally, I hold my beer. At one point, Janeway goes in, and I was going to watch this the other night. There's an episode where they actually go hunting for the Borg. Like, you're the prey this time to get a transwarp coil. They were going to get some, and it was a smaller ship. It was a scout ship, but it was an armored one, and they were literally taking it on and smashing it up. And I was just like,
a little not realistic.
Yeah,
it would have been better. It would have been better if the Borg had, I don't know, run into some anomaly and blew up, and then they could get it then, or Species 8479, whatever, destroyed.
Species 8472, man, come on.
Right, 847, whatever, and they get it then. I mean, that would have made more sense. But yeah, you don't go after the Borg, dude. You're gonna get destroyed. You can't just go after them.
Yeah, an episode.
But you really don't want to pick.
The episode they done with the Borg where I never remember the name of episodes. I'm really bad with names and things. But when they had the dream state of the Borg, I just thought that was a bit silly. And then you seen more of the 709 as her human form, and you see her as her human form, and you're like, oh my god, she's even more stunning. And they're doing the dreaming thing, and she's got a lovely enough talk. Oh, no. But then you start seeing more of the Borg Queen stuff, and it was either Suzanne, I think it was Suzanne Thompson, I think Alice Krige was in the movies. I may have them mixed up though, right, the other way around. But the Borg Queen in that and Endgame was brilliant. I remember watching Endgame, the series finale of Voyager, at a Star Trek convention in Blackpool, England. And at that stage, you couldn't get, the internet was very raw, you couldn't get the torrents and the downloads, and you would be a few weeks behind, 2-3 weeks behind the States. And I remember watching Endgame before people in the States even watched it. They had a copy, and we were all sitting there, the lot of us just, and at the end, there was just, you see them get home, and people were like, I don't think they should go home. It's still split to this day. There are some people, not many, that will say, I don't think they should ever got home. It's not believable. But they had to. It was a story. It was journey from start to end, great. And the score and the music when they got at the end, the look in Janeway's face, the emotion. I had a little tear in my eye. I thought it was brilliant. They come home, the whole fleet's there to greet them. And I'm glad at the time I went, please land, please, we want to see what happens, the celebration. Just give us 5 minutes of that. Now, in hindsight, I'm glad they didn't do that. Just they head towards the planet, it ends, that's it. One of my, and I was a lot older, I was well in my teens then, so I watched that religiously. I used to have VHS tapes of it, I've lost them now. I've met several of the Voyager cast at that Comic-Con, lost the pictures for that. I'm really pissed off about that, Gray. But yeah, just a top show. Gray's negative on it of some of the episodes were a bit meh. My counter to that is some of the TNG episodes were a bit meh. So, it's not a bad thing for me. There was always 20 plus episodes. You were always getting a small number of them that were a bit meh, but the majority of them were great writing, and what a sandbox they had. They had the best sandbox to play in, Grey. Starfleet, but
it may not be a matter of episodes. I mean, it's more of a matter of consistency for me.
Oh, yeah.
I think the consistency of good writing was better in the other shows.
Okay.
Again, not that they didn't have great episodes. They did. I just found that it went like this a lot. Sometimes you'd see one and you're like, man, that was a damn good episode. The next episode you see, I don't know. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it's great. And then it's great. And it kept, it kept going up and down so much. I was getting like nuts after a while. But overall, I still really enjoyed it.
I would have killed. It would never happen to see Voyager re-released in. I mean, 4K. Yeah, that never even happened with
Never happened.
TOS or the Next Generation. But to see it even released in HD would be great. But we've touched on briefly why that never happened. Too expensive. But I would love, 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 love to see it. But yeah, anyway, so that's my top show and the reasons why and the negatives. What is Gray's top show? Why? And you've got to point out at least one negative for me, man. Surely.
I wonder, what could it be?
I think it's Discovery, mate. I think it's Star Trek Discovery.
No. No, the first and the best to me is always going to be the original series. That I would never change my mind.
Or just Star Trek, as it was called then.
Just plain Star Trek, right? We've all adopted the original series because, well, it was first, so it was the original series, regardless of timelines and all that other stuff. For me, it's I think part of the reason, and I could be wrong about this, but part of the reason I think too is what you grew up on. Trev grew up on Voyager, so as some of your opinion is going to be a bit jaded because you grew up with it. And for me, it definitely would be the same thing too. The cool thing though is, being a little bit older, is I truly did grow up at the beginning of Star Trek.
And you were at a good age for it as well, 10, mate.
Exactly. And the funny thing was, I loved science fiction then. I used to read, books by the old authors, Jules Verne.
Great. Can I ask you a real quick question? Did the show season 1, 2, and 3 back to back, or was there ever a break in between them?
Oh no, it was season 1. What they did is back then anyway. Season 1 did its amount of episodes, and then it was off for months until it came back for season 2. Back then, everything was on schedule. So in other words, the season premiered of all the new shows and the shows returning would all premiere in September.
Yeah.
Period.
That's out the window now.
Right, and they would all run until around whatever, February, March, April, depends. May, and then all of a sudden, once summer started getting close, that was it. And then you had 3 or 4 months of nothing, and then it would return for the second season. It was always that way until things started getting crazy. So for me, it was just like, I'm reading science fiction. I'm loving science fiction. I'm reading the books like crazy of all different science fiction authors and junk. I mean Heinlein and H.G. Wells and Jules Verne and all this stuff. I'm reading the classics. And then all of a sudden I see like, oh, we're gonna do a sci-fi series on television. I'm going like, really? Because everything on television is the furthest thing from science fiction you can think of back then. And so I'm going like, right. So, and then I start seeing this thing, Star Trek, and I go, oh, that's a cool name. And then I started seeing some of the promos for it before it ever aired, and I'm like, okay,
to boldly go.
This is different. And I'm going, this is different. And then once I saw the Enterprise, my jaw drops to the ground. I'm just going like, what a freaking cool ship that is. I'm like, I've never seen.
What did you make of it, Gray, when you first saw it? What did you make of it? Were you like, what's the deflector thing? What are these pylons thing? What propulsion has it got?
I seriously was speechless. I've never seen a ship like that because I always,
very unique.
You're always thinking of something that looks like a jet or something that looks like a flying saucer.
Yes, old sci-fi, original sci-fi.
Stuff, right. And so nothing like this ever. I never dreamed a ship could ever look like this. I'm like, what is this? And I look at it and I'm just like, and it was so glorious watching the ship. And I'm just going like, wow. I'm saying like, well, this is just way beyond anything I've ever seen because there wasn't much on.
Yeah.
So to this day, I still feel that way because that was it's hard to describe it, but your emotions just go crazy because you're a sci-fi nut and everybody.
No, great. I understand perfectly, mate. I really do.
So that was great. So being the first, growing up with it, and then even more so, even though I was only 10 when it started, and I actually liked it even better when I got a little older and saw the reruns for the second, third, fourth, fifth, eighth time. I realized how good the writing was. I couldn't, because I have been reading books, and I'm going like, wow, they're actually writing something intelligent. I mean, this is like intelligent stuff. And I'm going, nobody does this on television. And I'm watching like Beverly Hillbillies and Gilligan's Island and all this stuff.
Okay.
And you're not talking about super intelligent stuff. They were good in their own right and they were funny, but this is nothing like this. And I'm just like, this is like really different. So it'll always be the best to me. To this day, I still strongly feel that overall, the writing for the original series is better than just about anything that's been produced for Star Trek
Yeah,
beyond.
agreed.
Period. Not that the writing was excellent and strong in TNG and excellent and strong in DS9 and excellent and strong in most episodes of Voyager. It was all good stuff. But if I had to sit there and rank writing of every episode of every series, then TOS still to this day is just, and there was reasons for that. Not just because it was first,
Hmm.
but they had science fiction writers as consultants and actual writers doing parts of the
Scientists
script.
as well.
Scientists, everything were involved. I mean, it was like,
They done that in
wow.
Stargate as well, to be fair, and I love it when a
Right.
sci-fi show does that.
Right.
That's what makes it semi-believable. Unlike things like Star Wars, let's hire someone Star Wars. No, we won't.
Well, see, it's funny you mentioned Stargate, because if I had to rank my top, 3 or 4 sci-fi series, it's Star Trek, it's Babylon 5, and then it's Stargate SG-1.
Stargate's my second, so yeah,
So
that
and
says
I'm not,
all.
and and even though I like parts of Atlantis, and even though I liked Universe and stuff, the first one, SG-1, is
Oh, it's the
still
best. Yeah, agreed, man. Yeah,
in my
yeah,
top
yeah,
3.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, and anyway, to get back to TOS, I just remember then when I'm watching the special effects, there was no special effects like this out there, period. So when you saw this and you saw space and you saw planets and you saw the Enterprise and you saw all the stuff going on, it was just totally brand new back then.
Yeah,
It, in our eyes, watching it back then, it was every bit as good as what we're seeing today,
yeah.
because
I
that was cutting edge,
understand.
you know, back then. So it was just outstanding. So for many other, and I won't even get into the cast now. So the cast that
Hmm.
they picked for TOS were also excellent. There's these people that were really good actors, and they were able to play their parts. And I'd never seen to that, and I know I was young, but I never saw an ensemble, what they call an ensemble cast like this before.
They were all
And I'm
great,
going like,
all of them.
wow, yeah, and it was truly the family-ish aspect, which is what really drives Star Trek, when you can like your crew, or your main crew, your top 5 or 6 or 7 of the crew, so much that they're, if you lose one or somebody gets hurt or whatever, you feel awful, because that's part of your
Some
family that
some
you build.
world first as well. The first interracial kiss. The
Oh
first
yeah,
woman of color
sure.
in a command position or at a bridge in a position like that.
Mhm. There was many things. One of the things that was brilliant about Roddenberry back then was the fact that he knew that he could get certain stories right around remember, he was dealing with TV censors. Okay. So the censors back then were very powerful. And if they didn't like something, it ain't going on TV, period. End of story. So what he was able to do is, because they didn't understand science fiction, a lot of the censors,
Hmm.
he was able to take many of the themes that were going on in the world at that time and incorporate them into science fiction stories. And the censors just went like, yeah, it's science fiction, fine,
Yeah.
whatever. And they didn't, and a lot of this got under their nose where they never even saw it. One blatant example was that there was an episode. I can't remember the name right now, but there was two characters on the episode, and down the middle of their face, right, their face was split. Half of their face was white, and half their face was black. Right now, I know it looks a little weird, but still okay. And he does this episode, and when I first watched this, I was totally surprised at the end, because I didn't even think about how this was going to end. As I'm watching this, and as I'm watching these two guys fighting each other, and they're like really pissed off at each other, and they both want to kill each other for various reasons, that they spelled out in the writing. The writing was good. You do this, and yeah, but you've done this, and blah blah. And I'm sitting there through the whole episode going like, what? I understand that they're angry at each other, but why are they so angry at each other? And why are they're both the same? What's the problem? I don't get it. So as I'm going through this and seeing the anger build up and all the stuff going on in the episode, and there came one point in the episode which you never noticed, because everything else was so brilliantly done around it. And Kirk, I think it was Kirk, asked like, why are you so angry at each other? I don't understand. And he goes, well, isn't it apparent? And the crew on the Enterprise is looking at each other going like, what's so apparent? I don't understand. He goes, my face is white on the left and black on the right. His is white on the right and black on the left. And all of a sudden, I'm looking, and when you see the characters, I never noticed it. No one noticed it. It was brilliant. And once I
Hmm.
saw that, I went, "Oh crap! So this is race relation and tension, etc., rolled up into a science fiction episode."
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden it all started making sense, and stuff like, wow, okay. And this would have been something that if it was normally had been done on regular television would have been censored immediately
Yeah. Yeah.
back
Yeah.
then. And he got through it. But this episode was so well done in the camera angles that they were using, how they whenever they showed the character,
Mm-hmm.
they very carefully didn't show them together per se, really close, except maybe when they're fighting. And
Mm-hmm.
even when they were fighting, there was like they did things so you couldn't really tell. So really, unless you were just happened to notice, you didn't know any of this until the end. Now
Wow.
that's just one example. I just wanted to point out an example of
Mm-hmm.
what was astounding about the series. That was not a hard thing. I mean, that was not an easy thing to do, to write and to get through the censors. And they faced a lot of that stuff back then.
Yeah.
When the interracial kiss came around, and they first read the TV censors, they said, this ain't happening. Sorry, take it out. And Roddenberry had to go back and say, yeah, but you don't understand. It's an alien entity that is forcing them to do this. This is not, they're not in their right minds. And the censors thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. And finally they went, okay, I guess you're right. Since they're controlled by aliens, the interracial kiss can go by
Came a
because
long
they're
way,
not
Gray.
really.
Came a long way.
Exactly. And
Wow.
and they got that by the censors. Otherwise, again, if that was put in normal television episodes, that would have been taken out
Yeah.
right away.
Yeah.
So
Is,
this is just another example. So it was very difficult to write for the shows
was
back
there
then.
any
And they did it.
negative to the show or the TOS? Was there
Yeah,
something
there
in it
was
you didn't like or thought could have been better?
there were some episodes like anything else where the episodes were kind of corny. Everybody knows, or most fans know, that the worst episode in the entire run of TOS was called Spock's Brain, and it was pretty bad. I mean, the actors tried their best, but it was really silly. It was all about how they took Spock's brain out and stuck it in the computer so they could run the computer with Spock's brain, and then meanwhile Spock's body is still working. He has this thing on his head, and he's walking around like a robot.
Did they
And I'm
actually
like,
take his brain out of his head?
yeah, yeah.
How's that
And
even
then,
possible in even Star
well,
Trek? It's
because
not.
it was an advanced alien race, right?
Oh, okay.
And so how do they get the brain back again? Well, McCoy sits under this weird looking thing he put on his head, and all the knowledge of the alien race invades his brain long enough for him to be able to perform the operation to put the brain back.
Where have we
So
seen this before?
already I'm watching this, and even as a kid, I'm going like, wait a minute. I mean, you can be pretty advanced, but this is a little much here.
That happened with Jack O'Neill in Start SG-1 a little bit, where the knowledge is downloaded to his head, kind of thing, that almost kills him, overwhelms him.
Yeah, yeah, and that's kind of what happens. Exactly what happened in this episode. So it was
Yeah.
done way before Stargate. But it was silly because there came a point in the time where he's putting the brain back in, right? And McCoy goes, "Oh, I can't remember what to do. The information's leaving my head." So how do they finish the operation? Spock tells them how to finish it.
Oh my god!
And he's going like, "Connect this, connect that." Yeah, okay, now I can talk better. I'm like, "Oh boy!" Like, so
It's just
yeah,
not
there was
perfect.
there's a couple episodes where it was kind of weak like that.
The ship never moving properly when it looked like a drunk person puppeteer moving across the screen.
Yeah,
That
but
never bothered you.
No, because back then there wasn't anything like it.
That's all you were used to. So you were
There was
like,
nothing that.
as far as I'm
Yeah,
concerned, that's normal.
exactly. It was totally normal.
Yeah.
Well, no, it was actually first of its kind. So what they did, you didn't see that. Later, you saw it because as effects got better, now you start going back and going like, oh, all right, now I can see this stuff. Before you saw nothing. You saw nothing. So it was all just like amazing,
Yeah.
But
Total
for that,
choice.
many and I've also been able to interview a lot of the people of the cast too, which is interesting. I never got to do the top 3, unfortunately. But I've doing more than once, Takai more than once.
Well, you
You've
said
seen
they were
videos
difficult to
on
interview the
Takai.
top 3 anyway, man. So I don't really blame you
Right.
for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, listen, time wise, we can really quickly mention an honorable mention here. We don't have really time for the best animated Star Trek. To give you a quick rundown. Gray and I's favorite animated show is Prodigy, by quite a bit,
easily.
probably. Yeah, and then Lower Decks because it was meh. It had good moments, had bad moments. It was meh for me. And then the original series, Grey's seen it, I've not, so I wouldn't even comment on it. And I'm not interested in never watching it either. It is voiced by the actors from TOS, which makes it special. it's the Scooby-Doo type animation. That's not for me.
Right. I only tell you one thing. The stories were freaking excellent. The writing was by the same people that wrote TOS.
Makes sense.
But when you got to the animation, oh boy, yeah, even I was cringing, even though I was a little older.
It was like I've seen bits of it, like Kirk and all that. See, when they start running, it's like the Scooby and the Scooby Gang running away in the mystery. But yeah, so that's just animated side of it. Prodigy is brilliant. It's good enough to be a live action show for me. The honorable mentions we had really quickly, and I haven't penned anything down for this. It was great to mention this. There's another two shows, obviously. There's Star Trek Discovery and Enterprise. Now, I don't know which way you put it down, Gray. I don't know which is the better or the worst of the two. I know you're not Discovery for me is the better of Discovery and Enterprise.
Yeah, that's the reason. That's the order.
And that's on season 3 and 4 alone, not even 1 and 2.
Because I looked at it this way, as a whole, since I did enjoy season 3 and 4, not so much 1 and 2 of Discovery. And Enterprise, I hated almost all of it, except for maybe some of the 4th season or whatever.
Gray hasn't. You haven't seen enough.
Yeah, Discovery would be better.
Gray's only seen 2 seasons, a season of Enterprise, so he hasn't seen all of it to comment. And I won't make him watch that. I won't. But hey, I'll stand by what I said. Yes, it's one of the weaker ones, but there is story arcs and there is episodes that are just phenomenal. I love the whole concept of being the first, the very first, the NX first. The technology wasn't always there. The phasers and the torpedoes and shields weren't a thing. I loved that. It was the concept, and I was at that age, came after Voyager, and that was the first HD show as well, proper CGI. I loved seeing this raw starship in the very start of it, and that's where the NX thing came from. They then started, there's NX of every major line that comes, every starship. So loved it, absolutely loved that. But I mean,
one thing about Enterprise, I think that disappointed a lot of fans at the beginning was the fact that we wanted to see a progression of something going into the future past TNG and DS9. We wanted to see the next century and how,
Yeah, we did.
And all of a sudden, it went all the way back to the beginning. We're going why?
Yeah, I know.
A lot of fans hated that. The second reason they hated it was the open and the music.
Oh no, I hated music.
Awful.
For everyone out there, Gray and I tend to prefer the traditional Star Trek music. Usually, there's no singing involved in it because it's very hard to do it. We like more of the
pieces.
Exactly, Gray. Thank you. And that's what works best when you've got a guy. It's been a long way. Shut up. Just mute it. See when Gray, they done a mirror universe of Enterprise. I don't know if you've ever seen those episodes, and the music is different. There's no singing. It's brilliant. It's so much better. Anyway, listen, guys, we do need to wrap up there. We didn't have as much time to talk about them, but we got the good stuff out there, which is the most important thing. We mentioned the worst show of all of them at the very start, Grace, so well done for that. Thank you all for your patience. We'll do the usual call to arms. Please comment below on your top 5. Please, I'm curious. Any ideas or specials you want to see? Little cheeky thumbs up there as Grace Schoner, and a cheeky subscribe if you like this kind of content. We are available on Trekway on Twitter and in all audio podcast platforms. You don't need to watch us. You can just listen to us if you want. My colleague and friend here, Gray, has got his own pod as well, GGR, where if you like Star Trek, we touch on it the odd time, but we do talk about lots of cool entertainment stuff. A lot of it is around like the superhero stuff, the fantasy, the sci-fi, but we'll talk about what's hot at the time really with Gray and his pod, and we do specials in that. We'll have one coming out tomorrow or over the weekend anyway, and he's at Gray's Green Room on the usual podcast and YouTube platforms and on Twitter as well. Give him a shout. And last but not least, we do a gaming pod. We're all about pods. With our friends over at Extreme PC UK, and if you Google for them, you'll get
we're doing in about an hour.
Yeah, exactly, and you'll get the Discord link for that as well. Because I think his website now is something like extremepcuk.podbean.com. He moved his podcast over to Podbean. Yeah. So if you Google that, I'm sure you can find it. But listen, thank you as always. We'll be back next week where we've got an interview. And I won't tell you who the interview's with. Gray had done interviews back in the 90s with some people. Tune in next week, Thursday for that. It'll be released. And until then, do your thing, Gray.
Live long and prosper.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.